Chapter 161, Alliance Raid, Seeking Monthly Ticket Subscription. Listening to the middle-aged man's explanation, Aoki felt a small flutter of recognition. The previous batch of trial participants, those who had gone to the trial island, had become squadron leaders. That meant when they came back from the island, they were often promoted straight to squad leader. The trial island rotations weren't strictly every 3 months. Intervals varied and could stretch to half a year. Not everyone got reborn like Aoki had, so someone who rose to squadron leader in half a year had to be exceptionally talented. Moyen had been silent the whole time, standing off to one side. People who'd come out of the trial island weren't like school seniors looking after juniors. They were extreme individualists who only cared about what benefited them. The middle-aged man didn't offer much more of an introduction. He mentioned Moyen only because Moyen worked under him. He produced a palm-sized black box, handed it to Aoki, and said, "This is what Lord Shadow needs. I've had it ready for a long time. Now I'm entrusting it to you. Make sure it gets to him safely." His gaze sharpened as he spoke. He usually looked amiable and harmless, but anyone who had climbed to Team Rocket Captain clearly had dozens, if not hundreds, of lives tied to their decisions. Aoki accepted the box solemnly and slipped it into his ring. He wasn't in a position to ask what was inside. His task was simple: deliver the item to Shadow. In the Pokémon world, teleportation was common, but some items could not be teleported because their energy signature was too strong. A high-grade evolution stone, for example, contained so much energy it couldn't be quantum entangled for transmission. That was why the job of courier still existed. All right, if there's nothing else, don't linger here. Kanto City is unstable right now, the middle-aged man said, already moving to usher Aoki out after handing over the box. Understood, Aoki replied. Kanto was indeed tense. A fight could erupt at any moment. Rumble! The base shuddered. Alarms screamed instantly through the facility. The single tremor left hairline cracks spidering across the walls. Damn it! They wouldn't attack now, would they? The middle-aged man's face went pale. He had only just warned of unrest, and now the Alliance was on the offensive. What were outposts for, if not to stop this? Moyen's expression tightened too. Even as a squadron leader, he wasn't sure he could survive a full-scale battle where the Alliance struck directly at Team Rocket. The two men left the office and walked out side by side, ignoring Aoki. If the Alliance had launched an assault, no one would care about a nobody like him. Aoki's stomach tightened. If the Alliance attacked, whether he could escape was uncertain. He glanced at the office door. Those two shouldn't be back this quickly. Slowpoke, set a coordinate here, he muttered, and summoned his Slowpoke. Though an Alliance attack would be disaster for the base, for Aoki it was also an opportunity. The research base's main computer held countless valuable documents. If he could get a chip that could access that database, the data he'd harvested in his previous life would pale in comparison. The main computer was on the 5th floor. Not even the previous Team Rocket captain had unrestricted access. Only executives and the chief researchers could go down there. If Slowpoke set a teleport coordinate here, Aoki might have a chance to return later. The risk was unpredictable, but he planned to act according to circumstances. Slowpoke focused, imprinting a psychic coordinate into the air. Aoki stored it in his Pokeball and nodded grimly. Moments later, the two men returned, their faces grave. Seeing Aoki still in the corridor, the middle-aged man's expression turned icier. "Moyen, take this kid out. I need to transfer data," he said curtly. "Come with me." Moyen grabbed Aoki's shoulder and hauled him along. In times like this, nobody showed kindness to a small fry. That the middle-aged man had Moyen take Aoki away likely meant he didn't have time to prepare. He feared he'd be injured or killed in the coming fight. Being brusque was a small mercy. Aoki clenched his teeth as Moyen dragged him toward the elevator, the grip on his shoulder painful but not crippling. They rode to the surface. "There's an elevator that goes straight up. Get out now, and whatever you do, don't head south. The Alliance is attacking from that direction." "The front line should hold for a while," Moyen barked, shoving Aoki into the car and slamming the door. Aoki stood in the elevator as it ascended. Half a minute later, the doors opened to daylight and hot sun. He stepped out and turned southward. In the distance, the rumble of battle rolled faintly, intermittent flashes and puffs of smoke marking where things were already burning. "The Alliance is determined this time," Aoki said under his breath. He'd looked into why the Alliance would risk an assault like this when he'd reached quasi-elite force strength in his previous life. It wasn't complete knowledge, but piecing together fragments from other trainers made a pattern. The research at the Lake of Rage facility brushed up against the Alliance's core interests, likely experimenting with the evolutionary direction of Pokémon. The results were unclear, but they must be close to success for the Alliance to move so urgently. Aoki lingered near the elevator rather than rushing off. It was dangerous here now, but the data in the main computer tempted him. Even a little of that material could be invaluable. The chip's abilities depended on the breadth of its database. If he could access some of the base's files, he might finally decipher how to hatch that Larvitar egg, or learn a more reliable method to rapidly advance a psychic Pokemon's capabilities. The risk was worth the potential gain. If things went south, he still had Slowpoke's teleport coordinate as an exit strategy. That single lifeline let him balance the danger against the reward. He tucked the black box deeper into his ring, squared his shoulders, and waited to see how the first clashes unfolded. Chapter 162, Athena vs. Price. At the center of the battlefield, where the two forces faced off, Athena stood on the Team Rocket side in a white robe, stroking the Houndoom at her feet. Her red hair framed a grim, determined face. Opposite her, at the head of the Alliance, was an old man with white hair and a cane, his vigor belying his age, accompanied by a massive Piloswine. No one on the field dared to underestimate that seemingly placid Piloswine. Its trainer was Price, the Mahogany Town gym leader, an expert in Ice-type Pokémon who had pushed Piloswine beyond its usual limits. The woman commanding Team Rocket's Mahogany base was Athena, one of Team Rocket's 4 generals. "Price, you actually came yourself. What did those politicians promise you?" Athena ground out. This was her territory. If the Alliance broke through here, she would be the one blamed. Whether it was technically her fault or not, Giovanni would record it as dereliction of duty. Price only rubbed his cane handle and smiled faintly. "Heh, young lady, don't be so hot-headed. I know what I'm doing. I won't ask questions. I'm following orders. If you keep getting in the way, don't say I didn't warn you." Athena's expression darkened. She knew her limits. Both she and Price were Elite 4 level trainers, but there were gradations even among that tier. Price was a veteran. She could feel the gap. She couldn't simply let them pass, though. At the very least, she had to stall long enough for her people to finish copying the data inside the base. If she failed, Giovanni would never let her forget it. She unclipped several Pokeballs from her belt, 8 in total, and sent them all out. One after another, powerful Pokemon manifested on the field. Price watched, chuckled, and produced 4 Pokeballs of his own. The two sides braced for a major clash. The difference in quality, however, was obvious. Including Houndoom, Athena had 9 Pokemon ready. Price, including his Piloswine, brought only 5. Yet their battle reached a standstill almost immediately. When the two began to trade blows, the other Alliance and Rocket members likewise engaged. It quickly became clear how different the Alliance's trainers could be. Many of them lacked the ruthless conditioning of Team Rocket operatives. A desperate Rocket member could often hold off 2 Alliance trainers of similar rank, and an inexperienced Alliance fighter could get cut down in turn. Price observed the field and gradually frowned. He reached into his coat for 3 more Pokeballs, and 3 more Elite 4 level or near Elite 4 Pokemon materialized. The tide turned in the Alliance's favor. Snow began to fall, and Price unleashed his full power. Athena grit her teeth as Price's team began to slaughter Rocket forces. She could do nothing except hold Price back with everything she had. In that situation, when she was barely managing to fend for herself, she couldn't spare the resources to protect others. The fight descended into chaos. After a tense half-hour, Price's offensive finally shattered Team Rocket's defenses, and Alliance trainers surged through the breach toward the base entrance. Far from the front lines, Aoki's lay prone and watched in silence, too afraid to act rashly. He was nearly 2 kilometers away, yet even where he lay, thumb-sized snowflakes still drifted down. enough to tell him Price's weather control reached a vast radius. This was more than a mere move, it was changing the area's climate. The power of a veteran Elite Four was terrifying. When Aoki saw the Alliance break through, he quietly summoned his Slowpoke, switched the mask over his face to one he rarely used, and rested a hand on Slowpoke's back, waiting for the right moment. Athena and Price continued to clash, but it was plain Athena was at a disadvantage. Having more Pokémon didn't make up for the gap in quality. Every surprise strike Athena launched at Price was met by the Piloswine's intervention. The Piloswine's job was to maintain the snowfall and shield Price himself. In reality, Athena's 9 Pokémon were facing Price's 4, and she was still being worn down. Aoki's waited until the Alliance had pushed the front line to the base entrance before making his move. Many people had already broken into the underground base. The first wave was probably deep inside by now. Slowpoke, teleport to the coordinates I marked, he instructed, laying a hand on the Pokémon and using telepathic guidance. Slowpoke's eyes lit up. The distance wasn't great. It quickly found the coordinates and, bathed in psychic energy, vanished. An Alliance trainer specializing in psychic types nearby sensed the teleportation and hurried over to Price. "Lord Price," the trainer whispered, "someone just teleported. It looks like they vanished inside the base." Price's eyes narrowed, a cold light flashing in them. "Ignore it for now. Keep sensing. If they reappear, note the direction and, if you can, use your psychic powers to block them." Despite the terse dismissal, Price's tone carried a hard edge. He was fighting tooth and nail and wouldn't tolerate anyone taking advantage of the chaos. "Yes, sir," the trainer replied. "Don't underestimate the Alliance. Many psychics work for them, and this one was among them." "Speed up the attack. Break in," Price commanded. His voice cut across the field. He shifted from defense to full assault, and the pressure on Athena increased again. She clung to the fight, stalling as long as she could, while her subordinates finished transferring the data. Inside the base, Aoki's used Slowpoke's teleport to enter the office he had marked. Chapter 162, Entering the 5th Floor, Seeking Monthly Votes, Bonus Chapter for the Generous Patron, Like Water Tomorrow. How the Alliance had stirred up such an uproar earlier wasn't clear, but the office's once solid walls now wore subtle cracks. When Aoki returned, the place was deserted. He led Slowpoke out the door. He had cleaned the 4th and 5th floors many times in his previous life and knew the layout intimately. That familiarity was part of why he dared to come fish in troubled waters now. The halls were empty. The Team Rocket researchers had evacuated at the first sign of trouble, and the combat teams were locked in battle with the Alliance upstairs. Doors that normally required authorization were meaningless to Aoki. By touching the small terminal beside them, his chip could infiltrate the lock and open it without leaving a trace. In less than 5 minutes, he reached the stairwell entrance leading from the 4th to the 5th floor. At that point, the Alliance forces had only just reached the 2nd floor. If they kept their pace, by the time they reached the 5th floor, Aoki could have been long gone. But he hesitated at the threshold. He'd heard the middle-aged Team Rocket captain earlier. That man had permission for the 5th floor. If Aoki rushed in now, the chance of running straight into him was high, and with that man's strength, Aoki might not even know how he died. He lowered the hand he'd been about to rest on the lock and weighed his options. As he debated, the sound of combat flared from around the 3rd floor. The Alliance had realized that if they let Team Rocket keep time to destroy the data, most of the research would be lost, even if they reached the 5th floor. A few decision-makers had ordered a forced advance and sent scouts in first. 2 elite Alliance trainers were already working to breach the door from the 2nd to the 3rd floor. Team Rocket had reinforced these key doors, and even with the 2 elites' strength, they couldn't blast it open easily. Only a small universal chip, like the one Aoki carried, could let someone pass unimpeded. After a moment's hesitation, Aoki didn't go up to the 5th floor immediately. He slammed his fist into the alarm switch at the entrance, crushing it. Instantaneously, alarms began to wail across the 4th and 5th floors. He ducked into a small room next to the 4th floor entrance and pressed himself against Slowpoke's back. If anyone came in, Slowpoke would teleport them both away. He pressed his ear to the door and slowed his breathing to the minimal level he'd learned on countless stealth missions in his former life. Outside, a mechanical door opened. Footsteps hurried past, accompanied by curses, "Damn it! Damn it!" then faded. Omuki kept his hand on Slowpoke and waited. 3 minutes later, the footsteps returned, calmer this time, and stopped in front of the fifth-floor entrance. No one. Then who smashed the alarm switch here? A voice muttered, seemingly talking to himself. Omuki's heart jumped into his throat. He used a sliver of his psychic power to form a thin mental thread linking himself to Slowpoke. The thread would let Slowpoke teleport with him in half the usual time. A loud bang echoed from upstairs. The two who'd forced the second to third floor door had finally broken through and were attacking the fourth floor door too. "Damn Alliance dogs," someone spat, and hurried footsteps moved away again. Relief hit Aomuki like a physical weight. If the man outside hadn't been distracted, his escape would have been far more dangerous. Without hesitation now, he moved with Slowpoke into the fifth floor. Inside, a ring of terminals surrounded the room. Keyboards cluttered the center, and original storage shelves stood empty. Everything else that could be useful had been cleared away with meticulous thoroughness. Athena's agent had done a careful job. Aomuki dashed to the main console and placed his hand on it. "Chip, analyze the database. Collect everything," he ordered in his mind. Beep. Task started. Analyzing database. Due to large volume, this will take time. Current progress, 0.1%. Aomuki had expected a lot of data here, but not this much. Even with the chip's speed, the progress counter crawled at a painfully slow rate. There was nothing he could do but wait, his hand on the console, his eyes scanning the room for any overlooked scrap of information. There were only scattered papers on the floor and tables, no other valuables. 10 minutes passed. The chip read 5%. Don't underestimate that 5%, Aomuki thought. It represented a massive amount of information. Another 10 minutes crept by, and the sounds of battle grew closer. The voice of a Team Rocket member who had previously run out could be heard outside, ragged and ordering others. From the tone, he was struggling against two Alliance trainers of similar rank. Lower-level Team Rocket operatives could be stronger than ordinary Alliance trainers, but at elite levels, the Alliance had the edge. Elite Alliance trainers were no longer inexperienced. Many had bled in true combat and carried the weight of numerous underground lives on their consciences. The fighting pushed to the fifth-floor entrance. Aomuki had to give up the safety of the terminal. If he stayed, he would almost certainly be cut off. Fortunately, the chip's progress had reached 15%, a huge haul already. He only hoped the data included something truly useful. "Slowpoke Tella," he began. Chapter 164, Interrupt Instant Movement, for monthly tickets. As Omori was leaving, he spotted a broken test tube with some green liquid between the two computers. Less than half the liquid remained. He picked up the test tube, took a small bottle from his ring, poured the liquid into it, tightened the cap, and slipped both the bottle and the broken tube back into his ring. "Slowpoke, teleport. Let's go." He placed his hand on Slowpoke's back. The Slowpoke gathered its psychic energy, closed its eyes, and searched for the coordinates it had used before. Its eyes snapped open as it locked onto the preset destination. A blue aura flared around them, and in an instant, the two of them were gone. Unknown to Aomori, an Alliance psychic who had earlier detected that same teleport was fighting in the plaza outside the base. He felt Slowpoke's psychic signature again and called back an Alakazam that was engaged further away. Placing his hand on Alakazam's head, he linked their psychic waves. Identical spatial fluctuations appeared on both of them. Sensing it, the psychic waves surged, then flickered wildly before falling abruptly silent. Wiping sweat from his brow, the man hurried over to where Price was battling. He leaned in and said, "Lord Price, the teleport that entered the base earlier was just about to leave. I intercepted it. It should be somewhere toward the Lake of Rage. The target shouldn't be able to use teleport for the next day." Price and Athena had been fighting for nearly an hour. Athena hadn't been beaten, but her active Pokémon had dropped from 9 to 5. Price, too, was hurting. 2 of his 5 Pokémon had been knocked out. He'd held back to guard against any desperate counterattack. Athena was still waiting anxiously for the subordinates she'd sent to handle the fifth floor to return and confirm it was secured. Only then would she retreat. Price registered the report. He remembered the teleport user. But he was in the middle of the decisive fight and didn't have time for a minor nuisance. "Send 2 people to look for him," he said. "Someone whose teleport can be interrupted probably isn't very strong." "Yes, Lord Price." The psychic agreed. The main battle was here. Whoever escaped was a small-time character. 2 capable trainers could handle it. Teleport is a psychic move. It demands a precise understanding of spatial fluctuations, so not every psychic type can master it. If a teleport can be detected or interrupted, it's usually because the technique is new and the user isn't proficient, or because the user is too weak and a far stronger psychic disrupts them. Most cases are the latter. Meanwhile, Aomori and Slowpoke surfaced in the depths of the Lake of Rage. Slowpoke floated dazed, bewildered. Its teleport had always worked perfectly before, so why had it failed now? During the spatial fluctuation, it had felt like something had shoved them out abruptly. Aomori wiped lake water from his face and looked at the confused Slowpoke. Normally when they teleported, they arrived and opened their eyes right away. This time, before he could even open his eyes, he'd been surrounded by water. If Slowpoke hadn't hauled him up, he might have drowned. He wasn't a fast swimmer. "Slowpoke, what happened?" he asked, catching his breath. "Yadon?" Slowpoke answered, then conveyed the event telepathically. Someone had intervened and disrupted their teleport. Was someone onto my data theft? Omori's mind raced. The Alliance? Team Rocket? Did anyone know who I really am? He felt urgency prick at him. If those people came hunting, he needed to disappear fast. "Can you still teleport?" he asked. Slowpoke closed its eyes and reached for the old coordinates, but found only a chaotic void. It shook its head. Someone had definitely interfered. "Then we should leave quickly," Aomori said. Using the sun and the surrounding mountains for orientation, he pointed them toward the shore. Leaving was the priority. If the person who'd blocked them could track them, someone like Sabrina, Aomori would be helpless. But his fears were probably exaggerated. Not everyone had Sabrina's talent or the interest to hunt down a nobody like him. Still, he didn't want to take chances. Slowpoke moved through the water using its natural ability. The lake teemed with Pokémon, mostly Magikarp. The real danger would be a Gyarados. Fortunately, when they'd been intercepted, they'd been near the eastern mountains. If they could get through the misty forest by the lake, they'd reach the foothills and be safe. Slowpoke wasn't fast. It took nearly 20 minutes to reach the shore, but they avoided Gyarados and made it. As Aomori climbed out and looked back over the water, he resolved to get a flying-type Pokémon for transport. Even a non-battle flyer would be invaluable. He could have flown over the Lake of Rage and the misty forest to the misty mountains and avoided being vulnerable at all. For now, though, they were safe enough. They slipped into the misty trees and headed for the mountains, hoping to put as much distance between themselves and the base as possible. Chapter 165, The Tracking Duo, Request for Monthly Tickets, 2-4. The misty forest lay east of Lake Rage, a woods perpetually shrouded in thick fog. Lose your bearings there, and you'd likely wander for hours. The fog and the ghost-type Pokémon that prowled the trees had driven many timid travelers to madness. Local guides warned that even experienced trainers should think twice before venturing in. The same warnings applied to the misty mountains that bordered the forest. After Aomuki climbed ashore, he didn't linger. He headed straight into the fog with Slowpoke. Slowpoke couldn't use teleport, but its other psychic moves were reliable, and Aomuki wasn't overly worried about any ghost types. For extra safety, he also summoned Honchkrow. He walked deeper into the forest for an hour before he finally stopped. He found some dry wood, made a small fire, and wiped the chill from his sodden clothes. Once he had dried himself thoroughly, he changed into a fresh set of clothes and stored his soaked ones in his ring. He was on the run and couldn't leave behind any traces. Though the sun was invisible in the misty forest, it had been close to setting when he entered. An hour in the fog meant it was probably dark outside now. He called his Pokémon together and began preparing a simple dinner. That was when 2 figures materialized from the mist. Both wore Alliance Intermediate Trainer uniforms and moved slowly through the fog toward his firelight. In truth, the pair had been wandering blindly, sent by their superiors to search the forest, but given no description of the person they were supposed to find. They'd been wandering like headless chickens when they finally spotted his campfire and rushed over, clutching at a possible lead. Aoki looked up as they approached, more amused than alarmed. He wondered if his streak of luck had finally turned sour. After stumbling onto a perfect campsite, he'd walked into two Alliance trainers. One of them stepped forward. "Hello, young man. Have you seen anyone else pass through here?" Aoki's mind raced. He pretended to think, then said, "I did see someone earlier. Soaked, looked pretty fierce. I let him go. Are you two looking for someone?" The two exchanged guarded looks. The one who'd spoken waved a hand, smiling as if to downplay things. No, just curious. You don't run into many people in the misty forest." Aoki calmly finished pitching his small tent, unfazed by their presence. "There aren't many people out here," he agreed. "Usually I don't see anyone for days. Funny thing, today I've met 3. Their skepticism eased. The young man in front of them seemed harmless, naive even. "You two must be Alliance trainers," Aoki said casually, ignoring the glance the pair shared. The two confirmed it hastily. "Yes." "Where are you from?" one asked, trying to sound conversational. Aoki sat on a flat stone by the fire, warming his hands. "Me, I'm from Saffron City, Kanto. I just started my journey. When I was in Akrutiak City, I heard the Misty Mountains are great for training, so I came in. Been here almost a month and still can't find my way out." The two crossed to the other side of the fire and warmed themselves. "Saffron? That's a big city," one said. Aoki shrugged. "It's not much different from Goldenrod. My family's ordinary. I'm the only one who became a trainer." The taller of the two brightened. "Ah, could you show us your Alliance ID, just to make sure you're one of us? We are Alliance trainers too." They tugged half proudly at their uniforms. Aoki feigned hesitation, lowering his head as if thinking it over. The pair, interpreting his pause as distrust, quickly produced their own Alliance ID cards and waved them in his face. Their other hands drifted toward the Pokeballs at their belts. If he gave any sign of trouble, they'd move to apprehend him. Aoki reached calmly into his jacket and took out his Alliance card, tossing it to them. The two examined it closely, checking the photo and details against his appearance. Everything matched. Compared to the Team Rocket imposters he'd run into earlier that day, these cards seemed genuine enough. They returned his card with a smile, a touch of embarrassment in their tone. "Sorry, just making sure. You know it's easier out there if you've got friends." Given their inexperience, they hadn't encountered high-quality fake Alliance IDs. Trusting what they saw, they relaxed and sat down as the fire crackled between them, the mist pressing in beyond the ring of light. Chapter 165, Taking Matters into His Own Hands, Asking for Monthly Vobscriptions. Aoki chuckled and nodded. "Big brothers, want something to eat? I was just about to grill." He pulled out a pile of ingredients and tools. His rugged survivalist look and the Alliance ID card he showed earlier dissolved most of their suspicions. He looked young. Who wouldn't be rattled if they'd gone through what he had at his age? "Haha, now that you mention it, I am a bit hungry," said one of them, rubbing his stomach. They'd been fighting Team Rocket all day and hadn't eaten much. The other man only nodded. He stayed guarded. Out here in the wilderness, caution was always wise. Aoki didn't mind. He began grilling. His Pokémon looked impatient, but everything seemed ordinary. Neither man had summoned their Pokémon. Their Pokeballs sat within reach. They'd arranged themselves strategically so they'd have time to react if Aoki's Pokémon did anything odd. Besides, while Aoki's Pokémon didn't look feeble, they were a step below the two men's, so neither trainer took them terribly seriously. After fighting all day, the trainer's Pokémon had been fed and recalled. Many handlers preferred their Pokémon rested in their balls during meals. Some people treated Pokémon like pets, others like tools. Attitudes varied. Soon the meat was ready. Aoki's grilling skill surprised them. The aroma was rich and appetizing. "All right, it should be ready." He sliced a small piece off and popped it into his mouth. The man who'd admitted he was hungry watched the golden brown meat and swallowed hard, too embarrassed to take anything without the owner's permission. The other man had been wary, suspecting tampering, but Aoki had grilled openly, and there was nothing odd about the food. The scent alone dissolved his last reservation. Aoki apologized for tasting first. Sorry, I get carried away when I'm grilling. I don't have many hobbies, but I love cooking. Want to try some? It's pretty good. They waved him off, but they hadn't brought utensils. They'd left in a hurry. Aoki noticed and produced 2 sets of tools from his ring, handing them over. From the most succulent piece on the grill, he cut off the goldenest part, skewered it on his dagger, and offered it to the hungry trainer. Thank you, the man said, already tucking into his bowl. Aoki cut another chunk, and, under the eager gaze of the second man, used his dagger to lift the meat toward him. It stuck to the blade. The man reached forward with his fork to help pry the meat free. As he did, a faint, cruel smile spread across Aoki's face. There was a cold, lethal calm in his dark eyes. The man finally tugged the meat off the blade, and then Aoki moved. The dagger flashed. In the instant the meat separated, Aoki's blade slid across the first man's neck, cutting a major artery. The man's eyes went wide, red spread instantly. The other trainer, cheeks full of food and stunned by the sudden violence, reacted in a reflexive fury. He lunged, using the fork aimed for Aoki's neck, a desperate, immediate strike. Everything happened so fast it all blurred together. The lunge, the flash of metal, the narrow space between them. Aoki didn't retreat. He used the momentum to step forward a few centimeters so the incoming fork missed the throat. The dagger that had just severed the first man's artery continued on its arc, piercing the second man's shoulder and then driving into his back. Bone cracked, and the blade went deep enough to sever his spine. Both bodies collapsed to the ground in a thud. The entire confrontation, from the tugging of the meat to the 2 trainers lying dead, took no more than a second or two. Even Honchkrow and the other Pokémon hadn't had time to react. Though the trainers had been cautious enough to sit away from their Pokémon, Aoki had seen no other choice but to act alone. Had they summoned their Pokémon, things might have been different, but he couldn't risk their alerting anyone. The outcome was decisive. Third update. I'm working hard. If you enjoy the story, please show some support. Recommendation tickets, favorites, monthly votes, rewards, anything helps. Thanks, Jinmu. Chapter 167. Return to a Krutech city, seeking monthly ticket subscription. 4. When the 2 bodies hit the ground, Murkrow and the others finally reacted, rushing over and assuming attacking stances toward the fallen figures. Aoki waved his hand to signal that it was over, then felt a sharp pain as the fork lodged in his shoulder bit into his nerves. Enduring it, he retrieved the Pokeballs from his waistband and locked them all away before he could breathe a sigh of relief. Everything had happened too fast. Aoki hadn't had time to make a plan. Acting then gave him the best chance of success, so he'd done it. Both opponents had been stronger than him and always on guard. Though he'd deceived them at first, his bluff had flaws. If they'd checked for the drenched person he claimed to have seen and found no wet footprints, they would have known he was lying. He had to deal with them before they went looking. Having his Pokémon act outright would have been too obvious. The 2 clearly weren't inexperienced and were constantly watching Murkrow and the others. Luckily, Aoki looked harmless and young, and wasn't especially sturdy, which lowered their guard. If he'd been a normal adult, they might not have fallen so easily. Grimacing, he pulled the fork out of his shoulder. Whoever had struck had been decisive. The utensil had been driven in with full force. Aoki threw the blood-stained fork into the bonfire to mask the scent, took a bottle of disinfectant from his storage ring, grabbed a branch to bite on, and prepared to pour the disinfectant into the wound. At that moment, Miltank stepped forward and stopped him, indicating she would help. Aoki was relieved and let her tend to the injury. It would have been more troublesome alone. After disinfecting the wound, applying trauma medicine, and bandaging it, the main treatment was done. Wiping sweat from his forehead, Aoki looked at the 2 people still on the ground, their eyes open, and thought silently, "If I didn't deal with you, you would have dealt with me, so I can only ask you to report to hell." Without further delay, he collected all the spatial gear and valuables from their bodies. With Slowpoke and the others' help, he buried them in the misty forest. He suspected it wouldn't be long before 2 new ghost-type Pokémon claimed the place. After clearing all traces and putting everything into his ring, Aoki left with his Pokémon. He hadn't lingered long before two Alliance trainers might show up, and he wasn't sure if more would follow. Better to leave first. This time, he had no intention of staying or even stopping to eat properly. Though with one arm injured, everything was awkward, and the wild Pokémon around kept Murkrow and the others occupied. 3 hours later, when faint bloodstains began to seep through his bandage, Aoki finally decided to rest. He found a large tree and, with his Pokémon, hastily set up for the night. After a day of high tension, he was exhausted both physically and mentally. He left Ghastly on guard and fell asleep quickly. His Pokémon, however, didn't sleep as fast. They understood the day's events clearly, especially Slowpoke, who had been with Aoki the whole time. What weighed on them was their lack of contribution when facing the two Alliance trainers. They had been ready and awaiting orders, but in the end, Aoki had had to act himself and gotten injured. The Pokémon felt guilty. Through the telepathic link Slowpoke maintained, they blamed themselves, reflected on their shortcomings, and vowed to train harder so it wouldn't happen again. Even Sneasel, the newest member, kept silent but didn't oppose Murkrow and the others' plans. None of this reached Aoki's ears as he slept. The next morning, Aoki woke with a headache and heavy limbs, but when he came to, he found his Pokémon gone from his side. Murkrow flew past, circling the tree and practicing flight. Slowpoke sat in meditation, its psychic energy radiating powerfully. Ghastly, who had guarded all night, showed no sign of resting and was sharpening its skills in the distance. Miltank practiced like she was boxing a tree. Each blow made leaves cascade down. Sneasel, unassigned and new to team training, had taken to climbing the tree as he used to alone, except now he'd tied two large logs to his feet to make it harder and improve his agility. Only Gligar still slept. Aoki watched them all, self-motivated, diligent, and smiled as he touched his shoulder. Maybe getting injured once wasn't entirely bad. Miltank stopped her training when she saw Aoki awake and helped prepare breakfast. Aoki pointed out a few adjustments to their routines, especially for Sneasel, offering targeted guidance for his first real team training. 2 days later, riding Onyx, Aoki led his team back into Ecruteak City's territory. He'd learned his lesson and didn't enter the city disheveled. He changed into an Alliance trainer's uniform, returned Murkrow and Sneasel to their Pokeballs, and took only Slowpoke with him as he walked into the city. The shoulder wound was still healing, but wrapped beneath his clothes it left no obvious sign. After 2 more days of surviving in the wild and hard training, the Pokémon had improved noticeably. Murkrow, Ghastly, and Miltank each gained a level. Murkrow reached 23, Ghastly 20, and Miltank 22. Chapter 4 is done. There may be more debt repayment updates tonight. Chapter 168, Buying a Flying Pokémon, Requesting Monthly Tickets, for Boss Xiao Mingming's generous reward, an extra update. Aomori had originally planned to stay longer in Ecruteak City, hoping to contact a few local families and learn some ghost-type training techniques, special methods for shaping a Ghastly into a powerful Gengar. Even though he'd had experience training Ghastly in his previous life, he was curious about unique family techniques. But the delays from the Lake of Rage base incident and the Foggy Forest battle ate up too much time. Abandoning the idea of lingering, he walked straight to Ecruteak's bus station. Buses to Mahogany Town ran rarely, maybe once or twice a day, but Goldenrod City had frequent departures, almost every 3 hours. With his Alliance ID card, Aomori encountered no trouble. He bought a ticket, waited a short while, and boarded the bus to Goldenrod City. Taking the magnet train from Goldenrod was the fastest way to reach Saffron City. What had taken him and Darkrai 4 days on foot now took 4 hours by bus. Stepping out of Goldenrod's opulent station, Aomori headed straight for the black market. On his way to the Ice Mountain, he had run into 2 Team Rocket grunts and taken their Golbat and Arbok, both promising Pokémon. He'd kept them rather than sell them in Mahogany, fearing they might be traced, planning instead to cash them in Goldenrod. The 2 Pokémon he'd acquired from Alliance trainers in the Misty Mountains, however, he dared not sell lightly. He'd wait until Saffron. Changing into his familiar disguise, Aomori slipped into the market with Darkrai. He casually sold the Golbat and Arbok to a small Pokémon shop, He knew the Hunters Guild wouldn't accept already tamed Pokemon like those. The pair fetched 200,000 Alliance coins, a tidy sum. He then submitted the Onyx mission to the Hunters Guild and received 100,000 Alliance coins and 100,000 Hunter points. Onyx were rare enough that even a middling specimen still earned a decent reward. After that, Aomori's total stood at 3.55 million Alliance coins, and his Hunter points had reached 1.85 million. The points came from the previous Swinub, 150,000 points, the Wild Donphan, 500,000 points, plus an original 1.1 million and the 100,000 from the Onyx submission. With 1.85 million Hunter points, he could exchange for a decent Pokemon, but resources were thin, and he couldn't afford to raise another creature right now. Skorupi would soon enter a demanding growth stage and would need resources. Besides Darkrai and Slowpoke, who'd learned a few TM moves, he hadn't systematically taught skills to most of his Pokemon. He expected a period of downtime after finishing Shadow's mission and planned to use it to consider movesets carefully. What he needed most immediately, though, was a flying type for transportation. The Hunters Guild only dealt in wild, untamed Pokemon. Taking the effort to tame and train one wasn't an option at the moment. Buying a tamed flying mount was the sensible choice. He didn't want a battler, just a reliable flying beast like the Onyx had been a land vehicle. Aomori visited many shops. Few flying Pokemon suitable as mounts appeared on the market. If they did, either the level was too low, the condition poor, or the price outrageously high. Black market merchants weren't fools. Any species capable of carrying a person in sustained flight was priced steeply, while cheaper ones were usually underdeveloped, only able to carry someone for 10 minutes or so before tiring. Just as he was about to give up, a sign caught his eye. A stall advertising a tamed Pokemon capable of carrying a person. He walked over. The seller launched into an enthusiastic sales pitch, lavishing extravagant praise on the Pokemon, as if Aomori would be foolish not to buy it. Aomori ignored the bluster and casually pointed to the hanging sign. The seller unclipped a Pokeball from his belt and handed it forward with a grin. Aomori activated his chip and scanned the ball. Pokemon Fearow, pale yellow. Gender male level 28, type normal flying ability, keen eye held item, none. Egg moves, quick attack, astonish, base moves, drill peck, fury attack, growl, leer, pursuit, aerial ace, mirror move, feint attack, agility, tutor moves, tailwind, TMHM, none. Fearow evolves from Spearow. A normally developed specimen stands about 1.2 meters with a wingspan and length that can reach approximately 3.5 meters. Carrying a 15-year-old like Aomori wouldn't be a problem, and a strong, well-trained Fearow can fly all day even under heavy load. In short, Fearow are the mules of flying types, built for carrying. Their downside is temper. They can be quick to anger, especially around rivals like Pidgeotto, and training is necessary to keep them steady. This particular Fearow looked well-developed. A pale yellow potential was a good sign for a dedicated mount. The seller, seeing Aomori's apparent interest, named his price, 300,000 Alliance coins. Aomori sniffed at the number. The seller was treating him like a sucker. To Aomori, 300,000 could buy a decently rare Pokemon with pale green potential. He tightened his grip on the Fearow's Pokeball and spoke coolly. 100,000 Alliance coins. I'll take it. The seller, who'd been rattling on non-stop, lost his composure as if something had grabbed his throat. He couldn't hide the shock, but Aomori had already sealed the deal. Today's the first chapter of repaying my debt. 5 chapters a day. Shouldn't there be some applause? Chapter 168, Stephen Stone, asking for monthly ticket subscriptions. This guest, don't you think this price is a little steep? It's an intermediate aptitude Pokemon, and it's already fully evolved. Aoki's blunt offer cut through the seller's flowery pitch. He wasn't throwing out a random number. He'd hit the mark. Aoki glanced at the seller and said casually, Intermediate aptitude? It's barely reached intermediate. If this were a Pidgeot, I'd give you 400,000, but it's a Fearow, so it's only worth this much. Although Pidgeot and Fearow are both final stage evolutions, their values differ a lot. Pidgeot's base stats are much higher, and it just looks cooler. Appearance matters. If 2 people flew by on flying Pokemon, the one on a majestic Pidgeot would draw a lot more attention than someone on a rather odd-looking Fearow. Besides, Pidgeot evolves from Pidgeotto at level 36, while Fearow evolves from Spearow at level 20. Three-stage evolution tends to be more valued than two-stage. Aoki declared the Fearow's aptitude was only barely intermediate, leaving the seller speechless. After a moment of pained resignation, the seller watched Aoki swipe his card. He paid 100,000 alliance coins and took the Fearow. The seller had tried to haggle for a few thousand more, but Aoki was firm. 100,000, take it or leave it. The Fearow had been on the market for some time. Inquiries dried up as soon as buyers learned it was a Fearow. It didn't have appealing looks, and its asking price had been too high. Aoki clipped the Fearow's Pokeball to his belt and left the black market satisfied. Other people might care about a Pokemon's looks. Aoki didn't. If it was useful, looks didn't matter, even though most of his current team were quite good-looking. This Fearow was only a temporary mount. Later, if he found something better, he could swap it out without guilt. It was already tamed too, just a bit of training after he got home and it would be ready to use. From now on, he wouldn't have to run when he needed to travel. He didn't linger in Goldenrod. Aoki headed straight to the city's Maglev station. He had taken the Maglev once before to meet Whitney. The process hadn't been perfect in his view, but it had a good result. He gained his first long-term client, someone who would regularly deposit money into his account, and he didn't have to worry about information leaks. At the station, Aoki saw the last return Maglev of the day would depart in 10 minutes. He jogged, bought a first-class ticket, and boarded just as the doors were about to close. The first-class carriage was the same as before, 2 seats in a private compartment, excellent service and privacy. When Aoki entered, someone was already seated inside. The man smiled gently as Aoki came in. Aoki returned the smile but felt puzzled at the sight. A young man sitting with an easy grace, wearing a neat small suit that carried an air of nobility. A red silk scarf lay around his collar, a favorite of the aristocratic set, paired with short silver-white hair. He looked so familiar. Stephen Stone, the future champion of Hoenn? The steel-type specialist, son of the Devon Corporation's president? It was hard to believe, but the young man opposite him matched the image of Stephen Stone, though not yet a champion. Aoki kept his shock to himself and sat down. The train swayed and then smoothed out as it pulled away. After a moment of silence, the young man spoke first. "Is that a Skorupi?" he asked with a confident smile, nodding toward the blue and purple Pokemon perched on Aoki's shoulder. "Yes, it is." Aoki smiled and stroked the Skorupi. It stirred from sleep, let out a soft chirp, rubbed against Aoki's cheek, and tried to clamber onto the armrest. Startled by waking up, it missed the edge and tumbled, but its tail hooked into Aoki's clothes. Using its tail, it hoisted itself back up, and on the next try it managed to stand on the armrest, watching Stephen with curious eyes. "Ah, what a cute little fellow," Stephen said, amused. He patted his knee in invitation. Aoki returned the smile and petted Skorupi's back. After being fed Miltank's milk recently, Skorupi's carapace had become very smooth, like touching jade. "I traveled through Sinnoh before," Stephen said, leaning forward a little. "Skorupi are common there, but they're pretty rare in Johto. Are you from Sinnoh?" Stephen was naturally at ease in social situations. The eldest son of Devon Corporation, he knew how to put people at ease. His interest was casual. There was nothing about Aoki that stood out enough to pique any deeper curiosity. "No, I'm from Kanto. I came across this little guy by chance," Aoki replied, smiling and shaking his head. "Tsk, what luck to meet a trainer like you," Stephen said, rubbing his chin. "Skorupi aren't great looking at birth. Looks like you've done a lot of work with it." Stephen had never seen a hatchling Skorupi before, but he kept up with Pokemon knowledge from regions beyond his own. From what he knew, a young Skorupi's shell tends to be dull and unattractive. Aoki's had clearly been carefully nurtured. Including debt repayment, I update 5 times a day. If you enjoy the story, please consider giving a monthly ticket as a token of appreciation. Chapter 170, Mitang. "Yes, it took quite a bit of effort," Aoki said with a smile and a nod. He had gone so far as to buy a Miltank just to make food for the young Trapinch. Although the Miltank had now become part of the team, there was no denying that at first it had been purchased specifically for Trapinch. He pulled a bottle of Miltank milk from his ring, slipped a straw in, and set it beside Trapinch. Trapinch's eyes narrowed into crescent shapes. He hugged the bottle with his two pincers, leaned back against the seat's armrest, and drank contentedly. The stranger across from them might as well not have existed compared to that milk. Stephen's eyes lit up when he saw it. Miltank milk? Did you get it from Goldenrod City? I ordered a lot a few days ago, but I couldn't carry it all, so they're express delivering it to my house. He understood why Trapinch was doing so well. Miltank milk made a big difference. Not from Goldenrod, Aoki said. It's from my own Miltank. Here, try some. He handed a bottle from his ring to Stephen. Stephen didn't bother with manners. He took it, popped the cap, and began drinking. Half the bottle was gone in one long gulp. He wiped a milk mustache from his lip and said, "Why does this taste even better than the milk from the Miltank farm?" Aoki looked at him. Seeing Stephen let down his guard like this made him seem a lot more approachable than the formal air he had appeared to be. Aoki couldn't help the small twitch of a smile. "It's a little different. I formulated the energy cubes my Miltank eats myself, so her milk is more nutritious. Some people ordered a lot from me, but I can't produce that much, and their Miltanks aren't widespread yet, so this might taste better." Stephen, as heir to a powerful family, probably didn't care about the details of energy cubes, so Aoki saw no harm in revealing it. But the listener seized the opening. Stephen's eyes sharpened. "You formulate them yourself? Are you a Pokemon breeder?" Aoki hesitated for a beat, then nodded. Without another word, Stephen tossed a Pokeball into the train car, and a Metang materialized. He stroked it as he spoke. "Can you make custom energy cubes for my Metang? Price is negotiable." Aoki inwardly thought, "Big brother, I haven't even said what quality of cubes I make." The way Stephen carried himself, he obviously expected high-grade energy cubes. Stephen's Metang had always been fed top-tier cubes. Recently, he felt even those weren't enough, so he wanted custom ones tailored to Metang's training and growth. Devon Corporation could afford the best breeders, but standardized products weren't what he wanted. He wanted something designed specifically for this Metang. Breeders capable of that were rare and expensive. Stephen had originally planned to ask his father to help find someone after he got home, but he hadn't expected to meet Aoki on the maglev and had blurted his request out. Seeing Aoki's expression, Stephen scratched his head with a little embarrassment. "Ah, haha. Well, I meant high-grade energy cubes." "I can," Aoki said. It's okay. With your talent, you'll definitely—" "Wait, what?" Stephen froze, as if he'd misheard. "I said I can. Tell me your requirements, and I'll give you a price," Aoki repeated calmly. High-grade energy cubes?" Stephen checked again. Aoki nodded, a little helplessly. "I have an elder who can make them." It was surprising that someone his age could arrange custom high-grade cubes, but Aoki didn't want to miss the chance to latch on to Stephen. Stephen wasn't like Whitney. Both heirs, yes, but Stephen's family was on another level. The Stone family was far more powerful, and as the eldest son and heir, Stephen was already groomed to be influential. They wouldn't fuss over every acquaintance he made. If Stephen's Pokemon were weak, they could always buy top specimens or throw money at training. But Stephen himself had the talent and insight into training that had made him Hoenn champion. To him, being champion had always been more of a hobby than a destiny. "Ah, so you have an elder. Scared me for a second," Stephen said, looking suddenly enlightened. "But at your age, being able to make basic cubes is already impressive." "Who said I only knew how to make basic cubes?" Aoki thought, but the misunderstanding worked in his favor. It kept things quiet. At his age, making basic cubes wasn't unheard of. Many disciples of breeding masters could do it, so Stephen probably assumed Aoki was one of those. Aoki turned his attention to the Metang, an unevolved form of Hoenn's pseudo-legendary Metagross. It was the first time he'd seen one in his life, and he studied it with interest. Chapter 171, Dog Big House, ask for monthly ticket subscription. Pokemon Shiny Metang, Dark Cyan. Gender, genderless level 30. Type Steel Psychic. Ability Clear Body Held Item, Keyberry Egg moves, none. Base moves, Confusion, Metal Claw, Magnet Rise, Takedown, Pursuit, Bullet Punch, Miracle Eye. Tutor moves, Gravity Thunder Punch, Ice Punch, Zen Headbutt. TMHM, Protect, Psyshock, Hidden Power, Flying, Hyper Beam, Earthquake, Psychic, Shadow Ball, Brick Break, Rock Slide, Substitute. Aoki stared at the Metang's data chip in stunned silence for a long time. What was this? Could this really be the ace of a scion from a major family? Metang's evolution conditions were peculiar. A Beldum only evolves into Metang when it encounters another Beldum and both have reached the required level. Then they merge. Metagross likewise needs another Metagross to evolve. Among pseudo-legendary lines, raising a Beldum to a Metagross was the hardest task, because you needed at least 4 Beldum, and each had to be high potential. Otherwise, the evolved Metang's potential would be dragged down. And what did Aoki see on this one? Steven Stone's Metang? Shiny. The requirements for a shiny Metang were even stricter. It would take 2 shiny Beldum to evolve into one. This Metang's potential was Dark Cyan, which meant the 2 shiny Beldum that produced it were at least Dark Cyan in potential. Rich Cyan. Even with all his experience, Aoki wanted to curse. Remember, this was only a Metang. When Steven became champion, the Pokemon at his side had been a Metagross, a shiny Metagross. That implied Steven had raised 4 shiny Beldum from the start. Given Steven's resources and habits, none of their potentials would have been lowered in the process. That meant all 4 shiny Beldum were at least Dark Cyan potential. Among Aoki's own Pokemon, his best potentials were only Light Cyan on Sneasel and Scorpy. His Honchkrow and Slowpoke were merely green, more than 1 tier lower. And the move list on this Metang, each move was valuable. Simply teaming and tutoring those moves would cost tens of millions. For someone like Steven, that sum would be pocket change. Aoki inhaled deeply and reminded himself none of that mattered. He only had to do his best. Steven noticed Aoki's blank stare and waved a hand in front of him. I don't think I caught your name. I'm Steven Stone. Snapping back to reality, Aoki looked at Steven oddly and said, Aoki, no surname. No surname meant no family, just an ordinary trainer. Steven didn't seem to care. To him, was there any real difference between an ordinary person and a member of a minor family? Nice to meet you, Aoki. He extended his right hand formally. Aoki took it in a light shake, then sat back down. He'd been too excited and had stood up suddenly earlier. Steven sat, too, and stroked his Metang like a treasured possession. Hoenn was the only known region with 2 pseudo-legendary families, Metagross, the final evolution of Metang, and Salamence. Dragon types often become pseudo-legendaries, but Metagross's status was partly due to rarity and partly to its unique multi-unit evolution. 4 bodies merging into one produced massive base stats and earned it the title. Tell me what you want, Aoki said once he'd composed himself. Metang could grow normally without energy cubes, as long as it had enough metal to eat. It would still become strong, but likely not reach the absolute top tier among pseudo-legendaries. He wanted to know Steven's specific goals. Steven considered and replied, I'm not a breeder, so I don't know all the details, but I want to maximize Metang's strength without significantly increasing its weight. Hardness is the most important thing. That statement made Aoki's head throb. Metang's main weakness was weight. Beldum and its evolutions eat metal constantly. Metal is essentially their food. Even at Metagross, they never stop. Steven wanted this Metang to grow exceptionally without getting heavier, a tricky request. To do that, a trainer has to know which trace elements encourage growth without adding mass, which elements improve performance, and which increase weight. There was one critical detail. Metang and its line could have the light metal ability, which halves the Pokemon's weight. Light metal appears only on Beldum, Metang, Metagross, and Scizor, and possibly on Registeel as a hidden ability. It's relatively common on Beldum, but becomes rare on Metang and almost vanishes by Metagross. Because Metang needs 2 Pokemon to fuse, for a guaranteed light metal Metang, both Beldum would have to possess light metal. If only one Beldum had it, the resulting Metang's ability would be a 50-50 roll. Likewise, if Metagross is to have light metal later, at least one of the Metang that combine must have it. And the fact this Metang was shiny made acquiring light metal even less likely. Still, in Aoki's mind, there was a way to temporarily grant Metang the light metal effect. Only temporary, but it existed. Imagine a usually slow Metagross suddenly becoming extremely fast. It would catch opponents off guard. A Metagross that retained its raw power while gaining speed would be among the very best pseudo-legendaries. Today's third update, all released together. The fourth update will come during the day. Chapter 172, Back to Saffron City, Seeking Monthly Votes Subscriptions. In fact, the trick Aomori had mentioned for temporarily changing Metagross's ability was to use a Pokémon that possessed both Imposter and Skill Swap. With another Pokémon that had Light Metal, the combo could be pulled off. Imposter lets a Pokémon copy another Pokémon's ability, while Skill Swap swaps abilities between two Pokémon. So if a Pokémon that knows both Imposter and Skill Swap first copied Light Metal and then swapped abilities with Metagross, Metagross would temporarily gain Light Metal. The catch was that having a Pokémon with both Imposter and Skill Swap was extremely rare. Those abilities aren't taught by TMs. To get them, you need a move tutor or inheritance. It's an unusual combination. Aomori had never seen anyone use it in all his previous life or in the records on his chip. He didn't know how many people in this world even knew the trick existed. Then let's exchange contact information. I need to ask my master, Aomori said, inventing a master out of necessity. He had to conceal the fact that he could produce high-grade energy cubes, and claiming he needed to consult someone was the easiest way to do it while also setting up a profitable arrangement. Daigo didn't hesitate. He took out his phone and exchanged contact details with Aomori. After all, producing energy cubes, especially custom high-grade ones, wasn't something you could rush. It took long periods of formulation and testing before they could be used reliably. I'll provide all the materials and cover the research expenses. Once the cubes meet my standards, you can charge your normal fees, Daigo said with a smile. Those were the usual terms for hiring breeders to make specialized high-grade energy cubes. The client covered materials and research costs and paid well above market price for the final product. People willing to customize high-grade cubes weren't short on money. Okay, but because of time constraints, the batch sizes will be small. Still, I can produce enough to sustain 1 Metagross, Aomori replied. With his production speed, he could supply what 1 Metagross needed without interfering with his regular schedule. What he feared was that a wealthy client like Daigo would place orders in the tens or hundreds of thousands, like Akane's family, turning his life into a daily cube factory. That wasn't what he wanted. Pokémon training was his priority. Selling some energy cubes was only meant to fund better training. Daigo nodded after a moment. Okay, no problem. His main battlers weren't limited to Metagross. He had Pokémon like Aggron too. But Metagross was his top priority, and the others could keep eating family-supplied cubes. Then I'll contact you when the formula's ready. All right. And so Aomori had secured Daigo, a powerful backer. As long as they kept contact, Daigo would likely accept less critical favors from Aomori in the future, especially if Aomori continued supplying high-grade energy cubes. That might include helping to find a high-quality Duskstone to evolve Murkrow if Aomori wanted to pay full price. It was certainly better than searching blindly, but their relationship was brand new and the agreement was still verbal. Aomori wasn't about to ask for favors yet. Besides, he didn't actually have the funds to buy a high-quality Duskstone right now, which made him grimace inwardly. The evolution requirements for several of his Pokémon were worryingly expensive. Murkrow needed a Duskstone, a good one at that. Sneasel needed a Razor Claw and Slowpoke, while easy to evolve into Slowbro would require the rare King's Rock for Slowking. Ghastly and Skorupi were a little easier, but overall it would take a lot of money to evolve them all. After that, their conversation flowed smoothly and pleasantly, mostly about Pokémon training. Daigo wasn't a breeder, but his privileged upbringing had made him well-informed, especially about steel types, so he was practically an expert in that niche. Aomori, backed by 2 lifetimes of experience and the data on his chip, had no trouble matching him. He offered unique insights on many topics, which made Daigo reconsider his opinion of this commoner. Time flew, and soon the maglev pulled into Saffron City Station. Aomori once again failed to admire the view of Mount Silver, but compared to his earlier meeting with Akane, this exchange had been far more balanced. He wasn't just a listener this time. Daigo had business to attend to and left quickly after they parted. He headed straight to Saffron City's airport to catch a flight back to Hoenn. Aomori took a taxi to the Saffron City Pokemon Center. He still didn't know how to find Shadow or complete the mission, but since he was using the ID card Shadow had given him, he expected them to come to him. With Shadow's influence and Team Rocket's reach in Saffron City, they would surely notice his presence. Shadow hadn't told him how to contact them, so they would likely send someone. All Aomori had to do was appear in public places under his league identity and wait. The Pokemon Center was the best place to be seen. Aomori wasn't worried that Team Rocket members couldn't enter. He was a probationary member of the Shadow Group, basically a foot soldier in Team Rocket. If someone of his rank could be issued an official league identity, what chance did anyone else have of being denied? The extent of Team Rocket's infiltration into the league was probably only known to Giovanni and a handful of top officials. Even the league itself wouldn't imagine how deeply it had been compromised. Today's fourth update. Is the update time getting earlier and earlier? Surprised? Chapter 173. Organizing Spoils of War. Bonus chapter for Shichen. As soon as Aoki stepped into the Pokemon Center, he booked a room and locked himself and his Pokemon inside. He had taken a great many items from the Lake of Rage research base in Mahogany Town, but the trip had left him no time to sort through them. Now, he could finally settle down and catalog everything. The chip had only managed to grab 15% of the base's massive data store. Chip, organize what you received, extract important information, and toss the rest into the data heap, Aoki ordered mentally. Beep. Task confirmed. Due to the large volume of data, estimated parsing time, 2 days. Remaining time, 1 day, 23 hours, 59 minutes. There really was that much. Aoki hoped the chip had prioritized the most critical files. He still didn't know the final outcome of the battle between Athena and Price that day. Athena had been at a disadvantage, but as an Elite Four member, she would surely have contingency plans to escape. Price, too, hardly seemed the type to throw himself away for the Alliance, at least not the current Alliance. As an elder who had been effectively sidelined to a place like Mahogany Town, Price had been kept out of the Alliance's inner power plays. He wouldn't be expected to die on command. Realizing this, Aoki frowned, and then remembered something. He drew a small glass vial from his ring, a half-filled test tube of a translucent green liquid he had found in a computer crevice on the 5th floor of the Lake of Rage base. He had almost left it behind. Only now, as the chip began parsing the files, did he think to examine it. Chip, analyze this. Beep. There was a few-second delay, likely because the chip was busy parsing and running other functions more slowly. Then the tiny display produced a result. Item name, Pokemon Catalyst, suspected, accelerate as Pokemon growth. Method of use, unknown. Note, inferred from data fragments. Rescan after full data parsing is complete for detailed information. Aoki regarded the vial thoughtfully. This half-bottle was almost certainly the main research product of Team Rocket's Lake of Rage lab, a growth catalyst for Pokemon. The chip couldn't yet provide the full details, but the basic idea was clear. He actually had a weak memory of this item from his previous life. After leaving Trial Island and infiltrating Team Rocket's Mahogany Town base, this catalyst had appeared on their exchange list. Its price was astronomical. Its effect was extraordinary. It could accelerate growth in Pokemon that were hard to evolve or evolved slowly, even forcing evolution in Pokemon stuck on the verge of changing forms. But it came with severe side effects. Lifespan could be drastically shortened. A Pokemon that might otherwise live a century could be cut down to 50, 40, or even 30 years. The reduction depended on how strongly the catalyst pushed the Pokemon's development. Most cases resulted in roughly halving the creature's lifespan. Team Rocket's original goal was brutally pragmatic: accelerate the training of their lower-ranking members' Pokemon so recruits could become viable fighters faster and narrow the gap with the Alliance. It was also tempting for trainers of slow-maturing species, dragon types or pseudo-legendary lines, for example, who otherwise required years to reach full potential. The Alliance got wind of the research and launched a surprise attack, determined to seize or destroy any completed product that threatened the balance of the world. Fortunately, the potion at Lake of Rage was still incomplete when discovered, its side effects not yet mitigated, and production costs prohibitively high. The Alliance ultimately left it alone in the belief that its current form could not realistically destabilize the world. Team Rocket abandoned the project, but not every researcher gave up. Dr. Sylvanas, the lead scientist on the catalyst, continued his work at the Lake of Rage base, trying to remove the side effects and lower production costs, work that, in time, would be tied to the infamous Gyarados rampage at the lake. That, Aoki reminded himself, was a different story. "So this half bottle is the prototype," he murmured, tilting the glass slightly. The flaws were obvious and terrifying. He wouldn't use it on his own Pokémon. Yet its value remained enormous. A completed vial would fetch a fortune from either Team Rocket or the Alliance. For someone in his position, though, the sample was a burning hot potato. Pulling it out now would mark him as reckless, if not suicidal. The Alliance would hate him for holding it, and Team Rocket would hunt him down as a traitor who had stolen their research. Best to keep it hidden in his ring. If he wasn't going to use it, it shouldn't see the light of day. Aside from the chip's files and the green vial, Aoki's biggest prize was everything belonging to the two Alliance intermediate trainers who had come to capture him. Their storage spaces yielded items worth nearly 1 million, valuable, but not the main attraction. The real gain was their Pokémon, 10 in total. Most had middling aptitudes, yellow level in quality, though a few had reached green. Levels ranged from 29 to 37. Aoki could only chalk his victory over them up to luck and the element of surprise. Without those advantages, he might not have escaped with so much. He set the vial aside and let the chip continue its work. There was still a day and change before the parsing would finish, and with it, perhaps, answers about Athena and Price and the rest of the base's secrets. Today's debt repayment update. I feel like the more I pay off, the more I owe. Chapter 174. The idea of elf training. Previously, Aomori had hesitated to sell those Pokémon. He was worried it would draw unwanted attention, so he waited until he left Goldenrod City before taking any action. Now that he was in Saffron City, and the black market there was effectively Team Rocket's territory, it was as good a place as any to sell them. Still, he wasn't in a rush. He could wait for Shadow to show up and deal with the items later. For now, he turned his thoughts to how to train his current team. Murkrow and Slowpoke were fine. They'd been with him from the start, and their training could be tailored to what suited them best. He only needed to fill in a few skills to broaden their move coverage. More specific adjustments could wait until after they evolved. Ghastly, however, deserved closer attention. He'd been one of Aomori's earlier catches, but had joined at a relatively low level. Although Ghastly's rate of improvement had been rapid lately, he still lagged behind Aomori's other main Pokémon. Part of the reason was that Ghastly hadn't evolved yet. His combat power was naturally limited. Another was that his poison-type potential hadn't been fully brought out, so his battle rhythm hadn't crystallized. Aomori wouldn't force things. The timing wasn't right yet. For a while, Ghastly would be a primary training focus. Ghastly evolves into Haunter at level 22. He was level 20 now, so it wouldn't be long. Aomori had traded for the Toxic TM at the game corner, but hadn't taught it to Ghastly yet. He planned to let Ghastly's poison attribute develop further first. When that energy was stronger, Toxic would be far more effective. Since Ghastly had come off Trial Island, the energy cubes he'd eaten had subtly enhanced his ghost and poison energies. In truth, he wasn't low on poison energy now, just not to the level Aomori wanted. Once Ghastly, Haunter, mastered moves like Rest, Toxic, and Sleep Talk, and combined those with Destiny Bond, Substitute, or Perish Song, he would become an absolute nuisance in Aomori's hands. Even against higher-level foes, provided the gap wasn't too vast, he could likely drag them down. So when Aomori hit the black market this time, one of his main goals would be to buy items that boosted a Pokemon's poison-type energy. Next was Miltank. The Pokemon Aomori had originally bought for Skorupi. Her aptitude was only lightly green, but she'd integrated into the team extremely well. Miltank had never been trained as a frontline fighter, so she'd been fed intermediate energy cubes. This trip to the black market would be about sourcing materials to create custom high-grade cubes tailored to her. Even if she remained primarily a support Pokemon, as long as she was part of the team, Aomori would treat her equally. Miltank's role went beyond combat support. She was the team's sensible center, helping with chores, mediating disputes, and generally keeping things running. As the only female in the group, her status was high. Even Murkrow, who joined early, and Sneasel, the newest member, deferred to her. The incident during her battle with Arbok had also cemented her importance. Her milk had become indispensable to the team. Then there was Sneasel, the proud Pokemon Aomori had just caught. He kept up a stoic front, and there was still some resistance in him toward Aomori, but the hostility had been slowly fading over a few days together. It would take time for him to completely lower his guard. When Sneasel joined, he was already the highest-level Pokemon in the party, and he'd held a grudge, perhaps because Murkrow and Slowpoke had been particularly ruthless in battle. He wouldn't act out, but he'd sometimes ignore Murkrow and Slowpoke. And in some ways it seemed Sneasel respected Miltank even more than he respected Aomori, which was a small headache. A more important issue was that Sneasel had spent too long fending for himself in the wild and had developed ingrained habits. He hadn't yet formed combat chemistry with Aomori. He didn't anticipate commands and move a step ahead the way Murkrow and Slowpoke did. In battle, he was almost always half a beat slow. That was fine against weak opponents, but it would be a liability against equals or stronger foes. So Aomori decided his next training priorities would be Ghastly and Sneasel, one to develop attributes in body, the other to sharpen combat awareness and team synergy. Sneasel had been eating the common intermediate energy cubes. This time Aomori would prepare materials so Sneasel could have his own custom high-grade cubes. That should help both his physical development and his responsiveness. Right now, the team's combat core consisted of Murkrow, Slowpoke, Ghastly, Miltank, and Sneasel. If you counted Miltank as support, that left 4 primary fighters. Murkrow and Slowpoke worked well together as a pair, while Ghastly and Sneasel were individually powerful. There was also Skorupi, still in his infant stage. He'd been sleeping less and less lately, and the chip's scan data showed his bodily functions had come into a good balance. He should enter a growth spurt in a few days. Aomori had already prepared the exclusive high-grade energy cubes Skorupi would need from the start. Early on, Skorupi wouldn't be needed in battle, so his moves could wait. Aomori would sort out his skills after finishing the main fighters. Then there was Firo, Aomori's current mount. He wasn't counted among Aomori's battle Pokemon and wasn't really a permanent member. Once Aomori caught a flying Pokemon capable of carrying people, Firo would lose his role, and Aomori would be fine with releasing or selling him. Chip, create 2 tasks. Analyze suitable high-grade energy key cube formulas and materials for Miltank and Sneasel, Aomori ordered. Beep, beep, task created, the chip replied. The chip had been slowing down lately. Aomori worried it might self-destruct from handling so much data. If it did, he'd regret it to no end. First update of the day. Please vote, subscribe, recommend, and bookmark. Chapter 175, The Gatekeeper, requesting monthly tick subscription. Fortunately, his worries proved unnecessary. Aside from a slight lag, the chip showed no unexpected problems. After all, although it had copied a lot of data at once, compared to the enormous archive he already had, this new upload probably amounted to only 10%. The custom high-grade energy cubes Daigo needed could wait a little longer. Since Daigo wasn't in a hurry, Aoki decided to let the chip finish organizing the data before starting to research Metagross's energy cube formula. While he was lost in thought, a crisp knock interrupted him. Dong, dong dong, dong. The rhythm was distinct. Aoki's expression shifted when he heard it. He stopped the Pokemon that had gone to open the door and waited for the knocking to stop. A moment later, there were no footsteps outside, just a small card slipped through the crack. He picked it up carefully. It read, Psychic Gym. This had to be the meeting place Shadow had arranged. Aoki had been prepared to meet anywhere, but when he saw the words Psychic Gym, a headache and a faint pressure bloomed in his chest. Sabrina, the unpredictable psychic queen who had helped Aoki awaken his psychic abilities, he didn't know how to face her. He told himself that with Shadow there, Sabrina wouldn't step over any lines, and that thought let him relax a little. How Shadow had found him or knew his room in the Pokemon Center didn't surprise Aoki. This was Saffron City, after all, a place as much under Team Rocket's influence as the Pokemon League's. If the League represented white, Team Rocket was its black counterpart. They'd infiltrated the League. A small Pokemon Center in Saffron was nothing to them. Never underestimate Team Rocket's reach, especially in Kanto, where they originated. Aoki didn't leave immediately. He waited until dinner, when the streets were quieter, then stepped out of the Pokemon Center. He made no attempt to hide his identity. He was in a League trainer's uniform and could taxi straight to the Saffron City Psychic Gym. The driver regarded him with pity, even waved away some of the fare, and sped off from the gym entrance faster than he'd arrived, like someone fleeing. Aoki rubbed his forehead. Sabrina clearly inspired fear among Saffron's residents. The massive gym had no one at its entrance. He pushed open the heavy doors and went in. Inside, people trained quietly. Almost everyone there displayed some degree of psychic ability. Most could perform telekinesis. Each person had an object of varying size suspended in front of them, manipulated by their minds. Seeing children barely older than toddlers levitating objects half their size, Aoki felt a twinge of embarrassment. These kids could lift things he, who had lived 3 lives, could only manage at the scale of a fingernail. Comparison only breeds frustration, so he adopted an out-of-sight, out-of-mind attitude and walked through the crowd toward the door, leading deeper into the gym. Just as he crossed the hall and reached for the inner door, someone appeared in his path. A young man in a blue jacket with pale blue hair, about 18 or 19, stood there, flanked by an Alakazam. He'd likely teleported. Whether he or the Alakazam had done it was unclear. The young man didn't speak. He merely pointed at a sign beside the door. No unauthorized personnel allowed, unless you defeat the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper? Aoki asked, voice low. The young man nodded, his meaning clear. If Aoki wanted to enter, he'd have to beat him first. People in the hall noticed and stopped training, drifting over to watch. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Look, another challenger for Lady Sabrina. Do these people think our gym can be entered by anyone? Humph, a clueless muggle. Watch Zanlin, Alakazam, teach him a lesson. Wait, there's a slight psychic fluctuation on this one. Maybe he's not a muggle. He is, but it's too weak. When the crowd sensed Aoki's faint psychic presence, their disdain eased. His abilities were weak. Anyone there could easily overwhelm him. But awakening at all set him apart from ordinary people. It was enough to catch some attention and temper their scorn. Even if he's psychic, he won't be match for Zanlon, someone said. Actually, another voice began, it might be better not to. After all, Lady Sabrina. The speaker's mouth was suddenly clamped shut by someone nearby. The person who'd covered them looked around cautiously and, finding no one watching closely, let out a relieved hiss. Hey, if you want to get yourself killed, don't drag the rest of us down. Some things aren't for joking. The blunderer wiped sweat from their forehead and shot a grateful glance at their rescuer. Sabrina's temper wasn't something people spoke of lightly. Aoki took it all in and smiled wryly. It was obvious everyone assumed he was a league trainer there to challenge the gym. It wasn't impossible that Shadow or Sabrina was testing him. He didn't think Sabrina could have missed him when he came in, so perhaps they were watching now from somewhere nearby. He was almost entirely right. Sabrina and Shadow were standing openly nearby, but no one could perceive them. It was as if they were air. Chapter 175, Kadabra, Questing Monthly Votes. The young man who had been about to insult Sabrina felt a rush of relief when he saw he wouldn't be punished. If he'd known Sabrina had been right beside him, he probably would have fainted from fear. Sabrina had been ready to teach him a lesson. If Shadow hadn't stopped her, she would have shown him what it was like to be turned into a doll. Even without acting, she'd memorized his face. Girls could be petty that way. Aoki heard them mention Brother Azure, the young man in blue who was blocking his path. In the annual league, very few trainers ever managed to earn the Saffron City Psychic Gym badge. It was notoriously difficult. Shrugging off the Psychic Gym was common for most challengers. Azure stood at the doorway like a living barrier. If you want to enter, you'll have to defeat me first, Azure said calmly, looking at Aoki. He'd sensed a faint psychic signature from the trainer. Otherwise, with his personality, he might not even have spoken. Bring it on, Aoki replied, glancing at the Pokemon at his side. Although the chip that parsed data was a bit laggy, it displayed Azure's Kadabra fully on Aoki's screen. Kadabra, green, male, level 27, psychic type, ability synchronize, held item, none. Egg moves included Barrier and Thunder Punch. Its basic moves were Kinesis, Teleport, Confusion, Disable, Psybeam, Miracle Eye, and Reflect. It also knew tutor moves like Gravity, Snatch, and Ally Switch, and had TM's HMs such as Protect, Shadow Ball, and Light Screen. Kadabra is the evolved form of Abra and the pre-evolution of Alakazam, a pure psychic type. The trio of Abra, Kadabra, and Alakazam are extremely gifted as psychics. If the trainer is also psychic, the synergy can be far greater than the sum of its parts. While Aoki did have dark types like Murkrow and Sneasel, the usual immunity of dark types to psychic attacks was less significant here. Kadabra knew Miracle Eye, which allows psychic moves to hit dark types. Murkrow and Sneasel couldn't rely on their type advantage as much as spectators assumed. The crowd gave them room and fell back to watch. Azure stood motionless in the doorway, signaling that Aoki could only pass if he beat him. One Pokémon decides the match, Azure said once Aoki retreated to create enough space. My Pokémon is Kadabra. Aoki nodded and threw a Great Ball. A Sneasel burst out in a flash of red and landed on the field. Dark Ice, sleek and alert. A few onlookers snickered. Typical, dark types beat psychic types, right? Someone muttered. Don't be so sure. That Kadabra isn't ordinary, another replied. Let him learn what psychic types can do. Azure frowned when he saw the Sneasel. His perception was sharper than the crowd's, and Sneasel's aura bothered him a little. Shadow and Sabrina, watching from the sidelines, also noticed Aoki's Sneasel. Shadow's eyes lit up. This kid's been lucky lately. That Sneasel has real talent, he said. Sabrina snorted. Lucky, maybe, but his psychic ability is pathetic. No improvement at all. What's the difference between him and a Muggle? She wagged a dismissive hand. Sabrina forgot that the Muggle she was mocking was standing right beside her. At Shadow's soft cough, she didn't seem embarrassed. Instead, she wore a triumphant smile. Aoki stayed calm, unmoved by the chatter. He wasn't the kind of trainer to switch Pokémon on a whim because of some taunting. If he had an advantage, he wasn't about to throw it away. The crowd quieted as they realized Aoki wouldn't change his choice. They were partly right about Kadabra. Miracle Eye made the difference. It bypassed Dark-type immunity and allowed psychic moves to affect Dark Pokémon. Aoki had considered sending Murkrow, but ultimately chose Sneasel. Sneasel's level was slightly higher, Kadabra was level 27, and Murkrow would have been at a more significant disadvantage. Kadabra's aptitude was green too, so Murkrow wouldn't necessarily be a better match. Plus, Miracle Eye could even tilt things against Murkrow. Aoki had also planned to work on Sneasel's battle training. The Pokémon had been caught recently, and their rapport was only average, but both were ready. The two trainers squared off. Sneasel, agility, Aoki called. Kadabra, Miracle Eye, Azure replied. Against a dark type, Miracle Eye had to come first, otherwise, whatever followed might be wasted. Kadabra placed the spoon in its hand against its chest. A colorful orb appeared, and a beam of light shot out, bathing Sneasel in a focused glow. The light didn't physically stop Sneasel, but from Kadabra's perspective, the aura of repulsion it had sensed faded. The opponent no longer seemed untouchable. It felt its psychic attacks would now have an effect. Sneasel, Hone Claws, Aoki ordered. Since Kadabra had spent that turn setting up Miracle Eye, Aoki wasn't about to let Sneasel waste the opportunity. Miracle Eye is hard to dodge. With it active, Sneasel might be hit by psychic attacks, so it was vital to raise its attack and speed right away and make the most of the opening. Chapter 177, The Crushing Power of Knowledge, Seeking Monthly Votes and Subscriptions. Kadabra, use Psybeam. Psybeam was a signature move for Kadabra and Alakazam. By bending its spoon, it could distract an opponent and lower their accuracy. Janlan's thinking was sound. Since the opponent wanted to boost speed and attack, reducing accuracy would make those boosted attacks miss and instantly negate the benefit of both moves. It was a tactic that would work against most Pokémon. Aoki, however, smiled faintly. The smile and the playful glint in his dark eyes told Janlan something important. Aoki had noticed a detail Janlan hadn't. Sneasel had 3 possible abilities, one of which was Keen Eye. Pokémon with Keen Eye cannot have their accuracy lowered, and evasion boosts don't affect them. Aoki knew this and chose to let Lan think otherwise. Sneasel, keep using agility, then use hone claws, he said with a calm smile. Lan blinked. At first he assumed Aoki was trying to outbuff him. Agility and hone claws together could be stronger than Psybeam's debuff. Still, he didn't expect Psybeam to be ineffective. He'd beaten plenty of dark types with it before. This time, though, he decided not to shout commands aloud. He sent the command telepathically instead, his eyes glowing faint blue as he linked with Kadabra's mind. Kadabra, experienced in psychic link battles, immediately fired Psybeam again. Watching from the sidelines, Natsume's eyes widened. She glanced at Lan's confident face, then at the impassive Shadow beside her, and muttered, "Are we watching an idiot fight?" Shadow couldn't hold back a laugh. "Ha ha! You psychics really do overestimate yourselves, don't you?" Natsume had just called them muggles earlier. Shadow's amusement was payback. Natsume rolled her eyes. The duel continued, and the audience's initial excitement was giving way to drowsiness. If nothing changed, it would be dull. There's a limit to stat boosts. Sneasel could cycle agility and hone claws and still had room to boost, but Kadabra had already reached Psybeam's debuff cap. Lan realized something else. Aoki wasn't worried at all. In fact, he was smiling. The blue light in Lan's eyes flashed. He decided not to play tit for tat. Give the direct attack command. Kadabra brought its spoon to its chest, but this time the spoon didn't bend. A pink psychic wave pulsed from it. Aoki, also a psychic, felt the surge and immediately understood Lan had stopped stalling. Run, Sneasel. After multiple agility boosts, Sneasel's speed shot up. It ducked the Psybeam easily and closed the distance on Kadabra. Kadabra wouldn't just wait to be struck. Lan's telepathic command made it swing its spoon, and its mental power tracked Sneasel's movements. Sneasel, use Ice Shard while running. Blocks of ice formed on Sneasel's claws, and it hurled them as it sprinted. Kadabra chose not to take the hit. With low HP and high special attack, it couldn't afford direct contact. Teleport. Unlike Slowbro's long-range teleport, Kadabra's short-range teleport was nearly instantaneous. Abra had known only teleport before evolving, and Kadabra had perfected it for battle. Sneasel, quick attack. Kadabra's teleport was fast, but Sneasel's quick attack, after boosts, was faster still. The arena was small. The gap closed in an instant. As Kadabra materialized and stood ready, Sneasel became a black blur at its side. Lan expected the attack to miss. After all, Psybeam had been used repeatedly, and he assumed Sneasel's accuracy would be crippled. He relaxed into a confident smile. Aoki matched it. Sneasel, use Bite. Switching moves quickly was always Sneasel's weakness. Its coordination with Aoki lagged slightly. This time, it didn't matter. Lan's overconfidence cost him. Sneasel's sharp, dark-imbued teeth sank into Kadabra, hitting hard and dealing double damage. Kadabra yelped in pain. Blue light flared in Lan's eyes, and Kadabra teleported away at once, putting as much distance as it could between itself and the wounded Sneasel. At close range, it would have been asking for a quick defeat. Lan stared at Aoki and Sneasel in disbelief. Natsume, watching secretly from the side, smacked her forehead and huffed. "That's it. I'm not watching anymore. Boring." Shadow only half smiled as Natsume teleported him away with a dismissive flick. To them, the match was already decided. Aoki would win. This was the crushing power of knowledge. Chapter 4, Awkward. I think I posted the wrong one before. Sorry about that. Mind-sweeping. Chapter 177, The Black Box, Seeking Monthly Votes. Added for the generous reward of Lord Wei Liangyue. Kadabra teleported again and left. One hit didn't prove anything. Maybe the opponent had just been lucky. Sneasel, use quick attack again, then follow up with Bite. The same scene replayed between Sneasel and Kadabra. This time, Kadabra did react and struck as Sneasel closed in, but Sneasel's dark-type attacks hit for double damage, while Kadabra's psychic moves only managed ordinary damage against it. The result was inevitable. Kadabra was only 2 levels higher than Sneasel, but Sneasel's potential was a couple of notches above Kadabra's. A psychic trainer with a psychic-type Pokemon didn't simply add up. The effect amplified, and the coordination was far more harmonious. Compared to Sneasel and Aoki, Lan and Kadabra simply couldn't match that synergy. Their biggest mistake in the end had been letting Sneasel accumulate so many move enhancements, otherwise the outcome might have been uncertain. Even after the battle ended, Lan remained a little stunned. The fallen Kadabra before him proved it hadn't been a dream. Aoki didn't linger to gloat. With Sneasel at his side, he walked straight to the door, ignoring the surprised, curious, and scrutinizing looks around him. When he reached Lan, who still looked dazed, Aoki said indifferently, "Excuse me." Lan finally snapped out of it and stepped aside, yielding the way, though his face showed clear unwillingness. He had been beaten. Aoki could pass, he could not. Aoki noticed the look and raised an eyebrow, making no move to explain the battle's process or outcome. As he always said, the most precious thing in the Pokemon world isn't rare Pokemon, rare items, or even pseudo-legendaries or legendaries. It's knowledge. Knowledge that changes power isn't a slogan. This match was the best example. Aoki pushed the door open and walked in under everyone's gaze. The psychic gym was enormous. The front hall took up less than a tenth of the entire space. He walked down a long corridor before emerging into another huge room packed with all kinds of dolls, some resembling Pokemon, some human, some pieces of furniture. Along one side of the room, facing the corridor, rose a large platform with a great chair made of cloth dolls, currently empty. At the center of the room, a man and a woman sat together, watching Aoki as if they had been waiting. They were Natsume and Kage, who had been watching the earlier match in the hall. Now they sipped milk tea leisurely, chatting without hurry. Natsume waved casually when she saw Aoki, signaling him to come over. Aoki gave a wry smile and didn't dare refuse. He approached their table and bowed, "Lord Kage, Lord Natsume." At that, Natsume's face changed while Kage smiled. "Hey, who told you to greet him first?" Natsume scolded, suddenly stern. Aoki blinked, confused. Kage chuckled and took a sip of milk tea. He lost again. Remember to pay up later. Aoki realized what had been happening. Natsume and Kage had apparently been betting on which of them Aoki would greet first. When Natsume waved him over, she'd been trying to make him say her name first. Aoki was speechless that two people of such renown, practically elite 4-level powerhouses, would be entertained by such a petty game. Even more absurd was how pleased they seemed. "Your name is Aoki, right? You made me lose 200,000, Natsume said, puffing her cheeks and pointing at him. "You'll pay him that money later." Aoki forced a smile and went along with it. Losing 200,000 alliance coins unexpectedly was an unwelcome expense. He didn't understand why Natsume had singled him out, but Kage did. It wasn't just the bet, it was the fact that Aoki had easily defeated Lan earlier, which had embarrassed Natsume. Lan wasn't her student or relative, but he was one of the people under her roof. Losing so inexplicably, without even understanding why, cost Natsume face in front of Kage. That was why she demanded the payment. Kage waved the matter away, then grew serious. "Did you bring the item I asked for?" Natsume's playful expression vanished as well. She might like to joke, but when things turned serious, she could be solemn. Otherwise, she wouldn't have risen to be one of Team Rocket's executives. Aoki exhaled with relief. He genuinely preferred to avoid Natsume's temper, never knowing when he might offend her. "I got it." He drew from his ring the black box the bearded middle-aged man had given him at the Lake of Rage research base. He had scanned the box with his chip and only learned the materials used to make it. What lay inside remained a mystery. Aoki set the black box on the table. Natsume immediately stood and stared at it. Then he felt a surge of psychic energy from her as she probed the box with her mind. After her confirmation, Kage reached out with his hand, a hand with 2 fingers missing, and slowly pulled the box closer. Kage entered a series of passwords on the keypad. With a soft click, the box opened, and its outer casing, once made of sturdy material, crumbled instantly into powder, revealing the contents within. Watching the box disintegrate, Aoki felt genuine relief. When he'd first seen the keypad, he'd thought about having his chip try to crack it to see what was inside, but he'd feared any hidden traps. He had been glad he hadn't acted on his curiosity. Otherwise, he might have lost his place within Team Rocket altogether. When the black box vanished, a transparent container slipped into view. Inside it sat 6 test tubes. Aomori's pupils tightened. He had scanned something like this with his chip that morning. These were elf catalysts, the very reagents Shadow had asked him to fetch from the Lake of Rage research base. Natsume broke the silence. She looked at the 6 vials with a grave expression. With her rank in Team Rocket, she knew exactly what the liquid did and what it cost. Shadow reached out. The clear box opened on its own. He lifted one tube and sniffed it lightly. "Are you sure you want to use this?" Natsume asked again, hesitating. The catalysts produced dramatic results, but their side effects were notorious. High-ranking officers knew them well, even if they hadn't yet found a cure. Shadow answered without blinking. "I traded almost half my savings for these 6. I intend to use them." Aomori didn't know the whole story. Shadow had been badly weakened on Trial Island, his strength atrophied, and his body was damaged. His Pokemon's growth rate couldn't carry him back to intermediate Elite Four level quickly enough. When the Lake of Rage Labs reported progress, Shadow had to get these reagents fast. Teleportation wasn't an option. The compounds were far too costly and energy-dense to transport casually. He could either go in person or send someone he trusted, but going himself was impossible. Weak as he was, Shadow might not even match a freshly promoted Elite Four in real combat, and the Alliance watched his movements closely. If he showed up alone in the wild, the Alliance could dispatch Elite Four to corner and suppress him. Team Rocket's ranks weren't monolithic either. Plenty disliked Shadow, and some might act against him if given the chance. He'd already been ambushed once by 2 Alliance Elite Four members after intel leaked from inside Team Rocket. He no longer trusted most of his own, so he'd brought Aomori off Trial Island ahead of time. Aomori's record was clean, his background unquestionable. He was expendable in all the right ways, unlikely to attract suspicion. Shadow could use him without risk. Training Aomori was part of the bargain, but so was entrusting him with the retrieval. Aomori had no idea. Natsume, however, did. She and Shadow belonged to the same faction within Team Rocket and shared information. When she first met Aomori, she'd meant to steal his slowpoke outright, but when he flashed the provisional member badge Shadow had given him, she'd held back. In front of high-ranking officers like Natsume, provisional members were still just grunts, but she understood Shadow's situation and Aomori's role in it, so she restrained herself. Ironically, that restraint eventually helped trigger Aomori's psychic awakening, something none of them had predicted. "But if you use these, you'll have trouble advancing later on," Natsume warned. The Elf Catalyst could accelerate a Pokemon's growth and restore Shadow's strength quickly, but any Pokemon treated with it would have its lifespan effectively halved. That meant that after pouring resources into elevating them to Elite Four level, they would begin to decline within a few years. Advancing beyond that would become all but impossible. Shadow shook his head, almost rueful. "If I don't use them now, I might not even live long enough to worry about advancement." He paused, then added, quieter, "I'll only use 3. I'll raise a handful of really qualified ones as a bridge. With enough resources, we can make it work." The words sounded like reassurance he gave Natsume, but they were also thin comforts to himself. At their level, everyone wanted to push higher, and the prospect of deliberately shortening your Pokemon's lives was a bitter choice to swallow. Natsume nodded. "There's still a chance, but you'll burn through what little you have all the faster." Shadow sipped his milk tea and said calmly, "I'm going back to taking missions. This time, I'll take the Trial Island job." Aomori stood quietly, taking it all in. The 2 higher-ups were openly discussing strategy within earshot of him. To be fair, it was a sign of trust, an invitation to be part of their inner circle. But it also meant he was being drawn into their orbit. Once he'd been pulled into Natsume and Shadow's faction, leaving without consequence would be nearly impossible unless he became strong enough to found his own faction, and that would still likely be aligned with them. For now, he was still just a low-level member, barely more than a pawn. From their conversation, Aomori did learn a few crucial things. Shadow was wounded and weakened from Trial Island. The Elf Catalysts were meant to speed his recovery, and the Trial Island mission itself was not simple. It must be lucrative or otherwise rich in resources if even depleted Elite Four could hope to replenish themselves by taking it. No wonder Shadow had cautioned him on Trial Island before. This mission was dangerous and consequential. Natsume heard the name Trial Island and shrugged. "That doesn't sound fun. I'm not joining. Be careful." Aomori suspected Shadow's injured hand from when they'd first met was related to whatever had weakened him. He also realized more clearly that being useful to Shadow had already changed his life in ways he hadn't expected. Recently, I've spent several chapters explaining some of the more glaring plot holes that had been set up earlier. It's been a little long-winded, but for the sake of continuity, it was necessary, so please bear with it. Chapter 180, Water for the Trial Mission, asking for monthly ticket subscriptions. In truth, Natsu wasn't very old. She was only a few years older than Aomori. But her exceptional talent and rapid rise in strength made many people overlook her age. Ever since childhood, she'd had strong psychic abilities, and few could openly defy her will. That only encouraged her quirky, unpredictable streak. As she matured, however, she learned to handle human relationships better. Otherwise, even with her power, she wouldn't have become one of Team Rocket's 3 major executives. Her good relationship with Shadow came from something more than flattery. Shadow never coddled her because of her strength. He restrained her from making certain childish choices, and in that way, he changed her. To Natsu, Shadow was mentor, friend, and an older brother all at once. She paid close attention to anything involving him, but this Trial Island mission left her unenthusiastic. It was messy and complicated, and she decided not to get involved. Shadow waved it off. He was fine with that. The Trial Island situation was muddy. Natsu's refusal might even be for the best. If he had a choice, he wouldn't volunteer either. Then Shadow turned to Aomori with a serious look. "I told you on the Trial Island that this isn't a simple trial," he said. Aomori listened without interrupting. "This trial is the one Team Rocket has invested the most resources in. The selection of participants was taken very seriously because this island ties into Team Rocket's plans to expand into other regions." Aomori frowned at the word expand. "You know Team Rocket is the largest underground organization in Kanto and Johto, but there are 7 regions the League has discovered now. An ambitious leader wouldn't be satisfied ruling only 2 regions." "Expansion is inevitable," Aomori muttered. "In other regions, even the League can't exercise absolute control," Shadow went on. "So it's impossible for us to just barge in. Underground organizations in each region are extremely closed off. If we tried to storm in openly, we'd be driven out." Some high-ranking members proposed a plan: send newcomers who finish the trial to infiltrate other regions, quietly take root, build influence, and then coordinate with Team Rocket to take over from both inside and out. Even if they can't become the top of an underground organization, they should at least gain meaningful influence. This was the longest Shadow had ever spoken to Aomori. He paused to sip his milk tea, then added, "Many people you met on the Trial Island were placed there for this reason. Some you already know. Powerful captains who hold real authority within Team Rocket. They're using this trial to establish factions in other regions and groom future executives." Aomori finally understood why some people on the island had seemed odd. Koga had been only one who didn't hide his identity. Many others concealed theirs and withheld much of their strength. "You're considered a dark horse who suddenly appeared in this trial," Shadow said. "If you don't join a faction, you might not be able to leave the island." "So only captains are sending their subordinates out and the executives are hands-off?" Aomori asked. It seemed like a dangerous opportunity for advancement. Why wouldn't executives take part directly? Shadow snorted. "Of course not. The captains are eager to send their people out to expand influence. But the boss has his own idea. He decided that candidates will be chosen from the top 3 on the Trial Island and from the direct subordinates of 5 major executives. Those chosen will be sent to other regions, given organization resources, and assigned tasks to complete." Aomori frowned. "The gap between the top 3 and the direct subordinates of 5 executives, it's huge. It's a big gap, but do you think the captains won't invest?" Shadow said. "The boss is letting them because he wants them to compete with the executives. Lately, some people have been getting too unruly." The exact combat rules haven't been released, but it's certain that no one will have only one Pokémon. The trial still officially advocates training one Pokémon, but those with backing have been secretly training more for a long time. "You're not bad either. Your Pokémon have good aptitude. They just lack raw strength. Train them fast, and you might still compete for the top spots." Shadow's words sent Aomori into deep thought. So the trial's depths reached at least 5 executives and tied into Team Rocket's multi-year plans. Giovanni might well be watching this. Giovanni tended to reward ability regardless of motive, confident he could control anyone with talent. But sending someone out with enough resources to found a faction was risky. Those resources could sustain a small faction, and even a loyal person might develop their own ambitions. It wasn't a simple matter. That possibility was also an opportunity. Could someone use this to build their own influence? Aomori didn't know what Shadow was thinking, but Shadow surely read his mind. "All right," Shadow said. "I've warned you about the trial. Now I'll tell you the reward for helping me with this mission." Aomori was about to refuse, but Shadow cut him off. "Don't be hasty. This reward may not be entirely beneficial to you." Shadow stood slowly and, with solemnity, took a black badge from his clothing. It resembled Aomori's previous black cloud badge, but there were differences. An extra stripe compared to the provisional member badge Aomori already had. Second update. Brothers with monthly tickets, please give some monthly tickets.